And so if we enhance connection, we actually get more cross-functional collaboration, which then allows us to come up with, well, I have this piece of the puzzle, I have this random piece of puzzle. What if we MacGyver it and put the two together? That might just be the big thing to unlock the big challenge that we're facing right now. Can't happen without connection.
Welcome back to the Management Theory Toolbox, where we systematically work our way through modern management theory concepts and continually add to our management toolbox. I'm your host, Travis Mallett, and today we're diving headfirst into one of the foundational fields of management theory, the realm of organizational behavior, or OB for short. So what exactly is organizational behavior? The definition is pretty simple. Organizational behavior is the study of how individuals and groups behave and interact within an organization. That's it. Done. I'll say that again. It's the study of how individuals and groups behave and interact within an organization. But you might think that this is an extremely broad definition. It's kind of like asking a physicist, what is physics? Only to get the typical grandiose response. Physics is the study of everything, or at least everything in physical existence. Well, okay, thanks, but what does that actually mean? Are there any limitations to your field of study? Where does physics end and chemistry begin? And how do you break down such a broad field of study into manageable chunks? We'll find that organizational behavior is similarly difficult to nail down, define, and delineate clear boundaries. So with that, let's start developing an understanding of what organizational behavior is. Picture, if you will, an organization as a vibrant marketplace. Not just any marketplace, but a sprawling bazaar, brimming with life, and a colorful patchwork of stalls. Each stall represents a different team within the organization. These could be sales, marketing, HR, customer service, you name it. And each stall has a unique role, serving different purposes and catering to varied clientele. Now visualize the sellers of these stalls. They're the employees of the organization. Each seller comes with a unique skill set, personality, and approach. Some may be outgoing and charismatic, enticing customers with their energy. Others might be more reserved, but highly meticulous, ensuring every product or service is presented flawlessly. The diversity of these sellers brings a dynamic energy to the marketplace, mirroring the vast array of talent within an organization. Moving on, let's think about the customers in our bustling bazaar. They could be internal customers, such as other departments needing assistance, or they could be external customers who purchase the organization's products or services. Their experience with the sellers, the atmosphere of the marketplace, and the quality of the goods they purchase all impact their perception and, in turn, their loyalty. Now in our grand marketplace, the products or services sold at the stalls symbolize the output of the organization. They could be anything from crafted goods to innovative software solutions. Their quality, innovation, and relevance to the customer's needs can make or break the reputation of the marketplace. The crucial element here is the behavior, interactions, and attitudes of the sellers. This is where organizational behavior, or OB, comes into play. OB is like the unseen force that influences how sellers interact with customers and each other, their morale, and their performance. For instance, if a seller is unmotivated, it could impact the customer experience and the sales at the stall. On the other hand, a motivated and well-supported seller might create a lively atmosphere and boost sales. OB seeks to understand these interactions, the effects of the organization's structure and culture on its employees, and optimize them. The more we understand these unseen forces, the more tools we add to our management toolbox, and the better we'll be able to recognize the forces in our workplace, both in real time and as we imagine and visualize the future and the consequences of our strategic plans, management tactics, and structural decisions. Although many textbooks on OB break down the concept into a multitude of different topics, one way to understand the study of OB involves looking at 3 intertwined levels: individual, interpersonal, and organizational. At the individual level, we look at factors like one's ability to learn, personality traits, motivation, and personal attitudes. These characteristics shape how an individual performs within the organization. Moving on to the second level, the interpersonal level, we focus on elements such as quality of leadership, communication within and between groups, and conflict management. These elements are vital because they determine how individuals collaborate and interact within the organization, directly influencing the overall team dynamics. For instance, Pixar Animation Studios has created a culture known for fostering collaboration and open communication. They have a ritual called dailies, where animators come together every day to review and provide constructive feedback on ongoing work. This open and honest communication, coupled with strong leadership, helps harness the individual talents towards a collective goal, enhancing the company's creative output. And it's an example of a management technique that would be studied at the interpersonal level in organizational behavior. Finally, at the organizational level, the structure and culture of the organization play a crucial role. These factors create the environment that allows individuals and teams to flourish, or conversely, can hinder their progress. Think about the world-renowned Cirque du Soleil. You might think, wait, isn't that a circus? How does that relate to organizational behavior? And you're right, it is a circus, but not just any circus. It's a modern-day global phenomenon that has completely transformed the traditional concept of a circus. And it offers us a fascinating case study for organizational behavior. Let's consider how it functions. It's not just a group of performers. It's an organization that involves a multitude of teams: performers, directors, designers, technicians, marketers, and more. Each team plays a vital role in creating the mesmerizing performances that Cirque du Soleil is famous for. Cirque du Soleil thrives because it has built an organizational culture that encourages innovation and risk-taking. This is embodied in every awe-inspiring acrobatic act that pushes the boundaries of human ability, and in every unconventional performance that mixes traditional circus arts with theater, dance, and music. But it's not just about the spectacular shows. Behind the scenes, Cirque du Soleil emphasizes the importance of communication and collaboration. Given the high-risk nature of the performances, trust and open communication channels are paramount. The organization has a flat hierarchy, which fosters a culture of respect and openness where everyone's input is valued. Moreover, Cirque du Soleil prioritizes employee well-being and satisfaction. Considering the physically demanding nature of the performances, the organization ensures performers are well cared for, with the provision of world-class training facilities, physiotherapy, and nutrition guidance. This attention to employee welfare not only ensures their health, but also fosters a strong sense of loyalty and belonging. Cirque du Soleil, with its unique approach, demonstrates that focusing on organizational culture, open communication, and employee well-being can create an environment that fosters creativity, productivity, and satisfaction. It's an unusual but brilliant example of how the third level of organizational behavior plays out in a non-traditional business setting. We'll probably revisit Cirque du Soleil in a future episode when we talk about strategic management and the blue ocean strategy, because it offers a stellar example of differentiation and value creation. But for now, the key point is that the third level of OB, the organizational level, plays a key role in understanding and optimizing the performance and in turn, the outcomes and success of an organization. If you've been with us on this enlightening journey, you'll know we always dig deeper than the surface narrative. We don't just skim through the textbook definitions. Sure, it's true that organizational behavior refers to the conduct of individuals and teams within organizations. And yes, it's generally categorized into 3 levels: individual, interpersonal, and organizational. But isn't it curious how seamlessly it all fits? After all, organizations aren't just static entities. They're pulsating human systems, often eluding such neat categorizations. Remember our discussion in episode 2? We likened organizations to neural networks, suggesting they are expansive reflections of our own minds. And this raises a tantalizing question. Do the 3 levels of organizational behavior echo some intrinsic aspects of our brains? To unravel this intricate web, we have our neuroscience expert, Ryan McCreedy, joining us once again. Ryan is a principal organizational effectiveness consultant, a teaching fellow at Harvard University, and a doctoral candidate at William James College, currently studying how neuroscience is informing leadership and organizational behavior to examine what is known about brain functions and the nervous system, and applying this to leadership and organizational contexts. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Travis, thanks for having me back again.
It's my pleasure. So we talked with you in a previous episode about how organizations are not just generic living systems, but they instead exhibit mechanisms and behaviors quite similar to neural networks. And this suggests that perhaps the traditional way of dividing up OB into 3 distinct levels doesn't capture the true complexity going on. What are some of the messy interactions in psychology and neuroscience that might relate to the complex interactions between the 3 levels of OB?
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you asked that question. This is what wakes me up in the morning. A lot of folks think that if you get people to act differently, like try a new behavior out, or if you force a behavior on them, that then it will stick. That's not quite the case. So if anybody has gone through any sort of training where they're supposed to act out or walk the steps out, but they didn't really understand the why, understand the implication, they're far more likely to fall back to their old ways of behaving. The traditional thing is like Pavlov's dogs. Every single time you feed them, you ring a bell. And then if you ring the bell, they're going to start salivating. Sure, there's some truth to that, but they don't know the why, right? When you get to organizational psychology, it gets to a deeper level where you're trying to affect the deep affective level, the belief system of an individual. In organizational development, there's first loop and second loop and third loop learning. The first loop is the behavior. You're a Roomba, you hit a wall, you just come back, you hit the wall a little bit to the left. You come back, you hit the wall a little bit further down to the left. That's behaviorism. When you get to the psychology and you get to the belief system, it's the Roomba that gets to question like, okay, why am I hitting walls at all? I understand that I should stop hitting walls. And that's what we're getting to there. The neurophysiological part is interesting because we're finding a lot of data that show that physiological states are precursors to mental states. We used to think when I'm anxious, my stomach gets upset. It's a bit of a feedback system. It's a 2-way street. If your stomach gets a little upset for something that's totally unrelated to what's happening at the moment, your mind actually creates a narrative. So we're back at the psychological state to meet that. And it says, oh, I'm worried about that meeting coming up. No, in reality, you ate like a slightly bad piece of tuna. And now you have a really bad affect on the situation that you created because it has been paired with that so much. Wire together is what we say in neuroscience. All that to say, if you cascade and you look at all of those and you're working at all of them at the same time, it can be really impactful. Chris Argyris is a very prominent theorist in organizational development and organizational behavior. And one of the things that he used to say is that we would act our way into thinking new things and we think new ways into acting. Basically, it's a cycle. Think ourselves into new ways of acting and act our way into new ways of thinking. It's a constant feedback loop. And if you're not hitting both at the same time, you're probably not pushing people down the development path.
That's very interesting. In a way, it seems like there is such tight coupling between the various systems in our bodies and brains that it sometimes doesn't seem useful to artificially subdivide them into different units. And I imagine something similar is the case with organizations. Can you say a bit about that?
The organization mirrors the level of complexity of all the connections of its individual people. And it's kind of like a giant woven blanket. It's a giant network. That's how I always think of organizations. I don't think of them as charts. I think of them as networks. And the behavior of one part of the network could have ripple effects down the rest of the network. It could go up, it could go down, it could go sideways. It's not as hierarchical as I think we sometimes like to think. Informal leaders exist as the largest hubs, the largest spokes in that network. The person that has the most full connections. What's interesting is sometimes that's like an executive assistant. And that person actually has the most connection and the most informal leadership, the most impact to changing the organizational system because of the number of connections that they have.
Okay, so just to keep everything straight here, there are lots of complex interactions between various systems in our bodies and minds. And organizations seem to mirror that complexity. Now, you brought up single, double, and triple loop learning in individual psychology. Do organizations, because they have all these connections and feedback loops, also exhibit similar behavior?
Yeah. So organizations are so cool because there's concepts called complex adaptive systems. Like you were just saying, there's tons of connections, tons of feedback loops. Complexity in a system is basically a function of the number of connections that there are. When you look at organizational learning and you look at those feedback loops, if the normal amount of connections within the organization is very few per individual, there's less opportunity for those changes in learning to happen across the organization. They call it network density when you look at it as an organizational network. But if there's less connections per individual, i.e. a lot of siloed culture, then what happens in one place will likely not transcend in the other place. It's going to be very difficult for that to happen. In today's businesses, that's a problem because adaptive systems are highly connected systems. And adaptive systems are able to look at what's happening externally and react to it in probably ways that there's not a technical solution for yet. And so if we enhance connection, we actually get more cross-functional collaboration, which then allows us to come up with, well, I have this piece of the puzzle. I have this random piece of puzzle. What if we MacGyver it and put the two together? That might just be the big thing to unlock the big challenge that we're facing right now. Can't happen without connection. And so at any rate, what we see in organizations is that single loop learning where organizations say, we have the best idea. We don't care what anybody else says. They hit a wall or they're extremely successful just once, right? They're one hit wonders. Okay, good for them. But they don't ever change their culture or anything else like that. Second loop learning, they change their culture. They change their belief system, their underlying beliefs. That's what the definition of culture really is in order to meet the need of the current moment. That's always happening. And then there's technically like third loop. And that third loop is saying, what are the societal things that we need to change? What are the disparate social systems that we need to connect in order to make a new thing? And to me, that's almost like blue ocean types of change. We're beyond culture now. We're saying we're going to change into a space that doesn't even exist socially yet. It's completely bewildering. And that's more ethereal and philosophical. Why are we even changing in the first place? To break that down simply, organizations in the first loop, am I building it right? Whatever they're doing. Am I building? Am I doing? Am I delivering the value right? The next loop, second loop, more culturally able to be agile organizations. Am I comfortable enough to say this isn't the right thing? Doesn't matter about the quality if it's not meeting the need, right? And then next level is why are we doing any of this? Is this even the right industry? Is it even the right play? It's way beyond that. Who gets to decide what is right is actually a question that they ask. Personally, I'm interested to understand how levels and orders of mental complexity relate to neural networks in the brain. And is that an ability or is it something that can be formed? The jury's out on that. I want to be extremely clear on something that's really fascinating right now. 56% of adults, based on studies, approximately 56% of adults are currently in the socialized level of mental complexity or below, which that level of complexity is almost the same as what generative AI can do. It goes back to that single loop or double loop or triple loop learning. They're in that single loop. And so there's a really interesting problem set in front of us where if it's an ability thing, there's a possibility that AI is currently creeping towards the same level of mental complexity as 56% of working adults. That's a huge issue. What do we do with that? No clue. No idea.
Wow, this was fascinating. Thanks again for joining us. It always seems like a fire hose of information when we talk about this stuff.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
So there you have it. What is organizational behavior? The basic definition is pretty simple. It encompasses the actions of individuals and groups in an organizational context. But as we discussed, this is a very large and unwieldy field of study which overlaps with a number of other fields. Not only that, but the topics of study within OB typically overlap and interrelate within the field of OB in complex ways, making this a challenging, complex, messy field of study full of opportunities for discovery. While some instructional texts on organizational behavior dissect the subject into these three distinct layers, beginning with individual analysis, progressing to leadership in groups, and finally encapsulating the abstract, large-scale studies of the organization as a whole, we'll be taking a topical approach. And this is primarily due to the sheer magnitude of interaction and interdependence that exists between each layer and across multiple subject areas. Let's take an example to illustrate this. Consider an organization that promotes a culture of work-life balance. This cultural value directly influences the employees' lifestyles, encouraging them to strike a balance between their work and personal lives. Employees in such organizations are likely to be less stressed, healthier, and more satisfied with their jobs. Now, this collective well-being of employees can reflect positively on the organization's reputation. The organization becomes known as a great place to work, which makes it attractive to potential employees. A better reputation allows the organization to attract and retain high-quality talent, thus enhancing its competitive advantage. But the ripple doesn't stop there. The influx of high-quality talent can spur innovation, enhance the organization's performance, and even influence its structure and strategic direction. This in turn can further reinforce the culture of work-life balance by creating an environment where employees feel valued, leading to a cycle that continually enhances organizational behavior. So organizational behavior is like a complex, intricate tapestry. Each thread is interconnected, and pulling on one causes the entire pattern to shift. That's why it's important to approach the subject from various angles, depending on the specific issues at hand. It's virtually impossible to track all these threads concurrently, but by focusing on different topics, adding each to our management theory toolbox, we can gain a better understanding of the whole. And that's why we'll treat this subject topically. We'll talk about diversity, learning and perception, motivation, stress and well-being, leadership, communication, decision-making, groups and teams, conflict and negotiation, organizational structure, culture, and more. In one way or another, each of these topics will be examined across all three levels of OB. Stay tuned for our next episode. As always, each episode is based on the latest and most robust management theory. Check out the show notes, which contain citations, references, and links to the source material for every management theory concept in the episode. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building your management theory toolbox.